What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. And this Saturday we have UFC Fight Night Kansas City on deck, featuring a featherweight main event, potentially 5 rounds between former featherweight champion, one of the best to ever do it at the weight class, Max Holloway, taking on Arnold Allen, who is undefeated at 10-0 in the UFC, a young rising prospect. So the proven commodity in Max Holloway and a guy in Arnold Allen who we've yet to see what his ceiling actually is. An awesome dynamic there. 14 fights on this card at Kansas City on Saturday. Hoping to keep as many of those as we possibly can because there's some fun potential wars on this card. Some violence I expect, and I like a lot of underdogs as well. So far I've got 5 money lines for this card I'll point out in the video. I do have one parlay that connects to last week's card as well that we're riding into this week with. So that feels pretty good. The props are about to drop on a lot of books, so join me on Wednesday night for my live stream at 6 p.m. Central Time this week on Wednesday. A little bit earlier than normal because I have the return of one of my favorites to break down fights with. You know him, you love him. Cody, a.k.a. Blood Money MMA Bets, will be back to break down fights with me. Going to accommodate him with that early start time of 6 p.m. on Wednesday Central Time. We'll break into these fights in further detail. I'll try to keep it short and concise for 14 fights in this full card breakdown. I always say that and it always goes a little bit long, but I'm enjoying it and talking to all over 900 of you guys sub to the channel at this point. I thank each and every one of you, from the OGs, from the beginning, to the new people that have just joined. It's an absolute honor to talk fights with you guys every week, so hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's break into that 1,000 subscriber club, and without further ado, let's break into the first prelim of the night. First fight of the night is at women's bantamweight between Jocelyn Edwards and Lucia Pudilova. You've got 2 strikers primarily going at it here, and both women are still trying to prove themselves in the UFC and reach higher level competition. Jocelyn Edwards, only 27 years old, Pudilova only 28, but this is Pudilova's second stint in the UFC. She went 2-5 when she was in her early 20s, was cut from the promotion and went to the Czech Republic promotion Octagon, where she went 5-1 on her time away from the UFC, only losing that one bout by decision to Talita Bernardo, who's the current Invicta champion. And Bernardo was able to out-wrestle her, and that's how you're going to defeat both of these women the easiest, is by out-grappling them, since they are good Muay Thai strikers. But Pudilova looks a lot less gun-shy upon her return. She looks a lot more higher output with her striking, and a little bit more aggressive as well. And I like the way that she responds to damage taken a lot more than I like the way that Jocelyn Edwards responds to damage when she gets hit clean. Edwards tends to shield up, almost turn her back, and retreat, whereas Pudilova will keep moving forward, bite down in her mouthpiece, and I think she's got the more well-rounded game here. Maybe a little bit better cardio as well, and we saw against Wu Yanan, who she defeated by round 2 TKO elbows, she was able to switch up the game plan in round 2, take the fight to the mat, show a little bit of wrestling, and work the aggressive ground and pound. So if she can get inside the range of the kicking game of Jocelyn Edwards, I think she should be able to put up the more points on the board and just land the more damaging, eye-catching shots, and maybe even mix up the targets better and maybe score a takedown or 2. But I want to see how she responds to a little bit higher of a test than Wu Yanan, who has since been cut from the promotion. So give me Lucia Pudilova by decision here. She's the -130 slight favorite, but nothing I want to put my money behind just yet. I still have to see how she looks with a little bit of a higher test than this one. Another bantamweight bout up next. This time it's in the men's division. We have Aaron Phillips versus Gaston Bolanos, and this is another striker versus striker matchup. And if you're unfamiliar with either of these two men, there's a reason for that. Aaron Phillips is 0-3 in the UFC, but it's been a while since we saw his first 2 bouts, which were in, I think, like 2014 or 2015. I vaguely remember him, and his last bout was his second stint, which he took against Jack Shore on short notice and in Fight Island. This was in 2020, and he's had nothing but canceled bouts due to his own injury, his opponent's injury, and he's just been inactive for almost 3 years now. The Taekwondo fighter Aaron Phillips. Now, Gaston Bolanos, you might not know unless you watch Bellator, because he's 6-3 in his pro MMA career, all in Bellator, including some Muay Thai fights, some kickboxing fights, so he has a little bit more experience than that 6-3 record does indicate. But both guys, very good strikers, both guys finishers primarily. You've got Gaston Bolanos, the more traditional Muay Thai techniques that you're used to seeing in MMA, and then you've got Aaron Phillips with the, the in-and-out, hands-low style, chin-up high, type of creative striking from his Taekwondo background, but he's susceptible to getting hit. He's very hittable, and his 0-3 record in the UFC really comprises most of his experienced fighters that he's faced. On the regional scene where he's got 6 knockouts and a couple of submissions, all very low-level competition for Aaron Phillips. So at 33 years old now, I think they're just teeing up a highlight reel victory for Gaston Bolanos, who has 6 wins, and all 6 of them are knockouts. A lot of flashy techniques, though, for Bolanos as well. He's got spinning elbows that are deadly, one of his signature moves, front kicks up the middle, front kicks to the face, and the guy has just got powerful left and right hooks up close as well. I expect he's going to close the distance here against Phillips, trap him against the cage, and score another under 1.5 round knockout, add to his highlight reel, and have a successful UFC debut. But the problem is the money line is actually decently wide for kind of a sketchy fight here. We've got one guy in Phillips on a long layoff coming back. You've got Bolanos making his debut, and he's been out-grappled in the past. Don't think that's going to be a problem for him in this matchup against a Taekwondo fighter, but minus 190 on the money line. I did just put 1 unit on that, just kept it a little bit light, and I'm hoping to add maybe a half of a unit on his knockout prop or his inside the distance prop for Gaston Bolanos. But so far, the one book that has that prop open as I'm speaking, it's like minus 105, so at that point, I might as well just take the under 2.5. So I'm hoping that some other books like DraftKings, FanDuel, maybe they have at least a nice, plus 115, plus 120 for Bolanos by knockout. The only way he's ever won any fight so far. Phillips, very hittable, coming off of a long layoff. So give me Bolanos to win, under 1.5 round knockout. Women's strawweight bout up next between Bruna Brasil and Denise Gomes. Should be a very fun matchup here. We've got Bruna Brasil making her debut in the UFC officially after scoring a round 2 head kick knockout. Highlight reel worthy knockout on the Contender Series last season. She fought Marnik Mann, who was an undefeated fighter, very short in stature at 5 foot tall, and Bruna Brasil with her long kickboxing weapons, flashy striking techniques, loose, creative counter-striking style, and a 5'6" tall fighter. She was able to pretty much destroy Marnik Mann's body with kicks, and then eventually Bruna Brasil went high with that and knocked her out with pretty much just like the foot, not even the shin, knocked out Marnik Mann. So that was extending her 7-fight winning streak for Bruna Brasil, and her only 2 losses have come by way of TKO stoppage, both to UFC or Invicta tier fighters. One was Ariane Carnelossi in her debut, and the second was against Jessica Del Boni, who is the former atomweight champion in Invicta. Both women were able to ground Bruna Brasil and get her off of her feet where she was not a threat, but they were early on in her career as well, so she's improved since then. But yeah, I mean, her punches are very long and accurate. Her head kicks and spinning attacks are very strong. Good body work, as I mentioned, against Marnik Mann, but to get her off of her feet is going to be the goal for Denise Gomes, I would say, even though Gomes is a very good striker in her own right. So this could be a striker versus striker for a while. Denise Gomes making her second walk to the UFC cage. She as well had a dominant decision victory on the Contender Series last August, but just 4 weeks later, she was called in a short notice bout to make her debut against Loma Lookboonmee, a fight which she showed a very impressive showing in a loss. She lost the decision to Loma Lookboonmee. It really came down to some grappling errors, I would say. Sometimes Denise Gomes was going for submission over position, and the crafty veteran in Lookboonmee was able to, outwork her and get to a dominant position on the mat. That's really what it came down to. Striking-wise, Gomes was pretty much holding her own, and grappling-wise, she had a couple of potential submission victory attempts over Loma Lookboonmee. An arm triangle comes to mind in round 1, and then also in round 3, I think she took the back and was fishing for a rear naked choke. Neither of those came to fruition, but still super impressive on short notice for Gomes, who's 6-2 with 4 knockouts, no submissions, even though she does grappling tournaments and things like that, and she seems to have a very good submission awareness and a wrestling game that at 23 years old is still developing. So the money line is wide as far as I'm concerned. I just pointed out a lot of ways where I think Gomes is the more complete fighter at this point. 23 years old, she'll be 6 years younger, so a little bit more improvements to be made at women's strawweight. Plus 170, the underdog price for Denise Gomes, minus 200, the favorite on Bruna Brasil, who's in her debut. So I'm going with Denise Gomes here. I put a 1-unit money line bet on her at plus 170. I like her to win this fight. I wouldn't even be surprised if she got a submission or a decision in this bout. She could finish the fight and take Bruna Brazil into the deep waters of a fight. The cardio of Gomes impressed me as well. It held up. Whereas Bruna Brazil, out of her 8 wins, 3 knockouts, 2 submissions, a lot of lower-level talent. And even on the Contender Series, we didn't see her extended. We saw her get a finish. So give me the proven cardio, the toughness, somebody who's gotten their debut out of the way in the more well-rounded Denise Gomes. Lightweight bout up next between Lando Vannata and Daniel Zellhuber. A pretty strange matchup considering how experienced Vannata is compared to the 23-year-old Daniel Zellhuber making his second walk to the cage, looking for his first win. So Zellhuber we saw a couple years back on the Contender Series in 2021. He came in as a potent finisher with, I think, 9 finishes out of his 11 wins at the time, undefeated, and he faced Lucas Almeida, who seemed to be a formidable threat, but Zellhuber was able to put up a good pace on him, move elusively, be defensively sound, and also put up triple-digit significant strikes in that fight, showing that he was not only finish or bust, but he could carry a pace. So I was impressed by that. He came back a year later against Trey Ogden, who was mostly a submission-based fighter, a lot smaller than him, and I thought he would run through Trey Ogden, but we saw in his debut he seemed very, almost too cautious, which turned to being really hesitant and gun-shy, and then it just turned into like deer in the headlights. By round 3, he was down a couple of rounds and really needed a finish. So we saw some flashes of that kicking game, some range-finding ability, but ultimately he lost an embarrassing decision there. So now we got to see where Zellhuber really stands amongst better competition, and they're giving him no favors here. Lando Vannata is a very versatile striker, power in his strikes, his kicks, and his close-range weapons. Very durable, never having been knocked out. And he's a very good wrestler and grappler as well. Good takedown ability against better strikers and a good submission game as well with 5 subs and 4 knockouts. So Lando Vannata has had a very up and down career in the UFC. He's gone 4 wins, 5 losses, and 2 draws. So, the guy often has really good moments, knockdowns, damaging, almost fight-ending moments early, and then can somehow pull, defeat from the jaws of victory, so to speak, later into a fight. So that's something to worry about here, and he is coming back from a sort of a lackluster 1-1 stint at featherweight. He's coming back up to his natural weight class now, so he should look better. And so his last fight was last April against Charles Jourdain. He had early success, as I mentioned, and then got clubbed and subbed and guillotined in round 1, just a couple of minutes in. So look, Zellhuber is very powerful. He's got a sniper of a right cross, very good kicks that don't really show much telegraphing, and he's got some powerful knees as well. But I think Vannata can take him down to solidify rounds. He can pressure him the way that Trey Ogden did and actually have some substance behind those strikes when he pressures. So as an underdog, I think it's a no-brainer here. I'm going to take 1 unit. I put plus 110 is the price. 1 unit I put on him. Daniel Zellhuber, he could be very impressive. 23 years old. He could show a lot of good improvements, but even the Contender Series version we saw of him, I think I would still take Lando Vannata at plus money here with the experience and the versatility in his game. So give me Vannata. I think he wins a decision here. Like I said, pressuring forward with the strikes, landing on the target, and solidifying the rounds with maybe a takedown or 2. Another women's 115 bout up next at strawweight. We've got Piera Rodriguez taking on Jillian Robertson. And although Piera Rodriguez is 9-0 and 30 years old, she is 3 years older than Robertson, who at 27 has all of the UFC experience advantage here, going 8-5 in the organization, while Piera Rodriguez is the newcomer, making her third walk to the cage. Robertson, 8-5 in the UFC. Out of those 8 wins, 7 of them are finishes, with 6 of those being by submission. And that's what Robertson brings to the table. Very high-level grappler. Not the most accurate or effective wrestler offensively, but if she can get the fight to the mat, if she can even drag or pull guard, she can really wrap up limbs, threaten with 1 submission to get you to react and then expose your neck. Well, she'll get a very crafty rear naked choke. And that's what she's done in her last appearance, scoring that round 2 submission victory over Maria Agapova in September. So her grappling is legit. The striking and wrestling certainly need work. And the striking is where it's night and day in this matchup. Piera Rodriguez, 9-0 with 5 knockouts. Among those, she's got extremely good Muay Thai, very powerful, plods forward, but still good in and out movement, but she plants her feet well, turns the hips, and puts all of the power into her strikes, her knees, her kicks. And, so far she's gone 2-0 in the UFC, scoring 3-round decision victories over Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes. And even on the Contender Series, back a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, she scored a 29-28 victory in that matchup, dropping round 2. Against Sam Hughes, she dropped to round 3, and against Kay Hansen, she dropped to round 1. So she's always dropping at least one round and making it a little bit close. Some of that is due to her power that she throws into all of her strikes. Whether it lands or not, she expends a lot of energy there with the Muay Thai. So if she could learn to pace herself a little bit more, she also does threaten with takedowns a lot, and that's a key to her success. So, trying to get girls to the mat and hold them down, striking with all sorts of power. While that's effective and eye-catching for the judges in the minute winning, it does use a lot of energy. So the cardio is a bit of a concern, but same for Robertson. My concern for her is she's very finish-dependent, only going 2-5 in decision results. So if she's finish-dependent in this matchup, but Rodriguez, I'd say, is the better striker on the feet. I think she's fast enough to really be hard to get a hold of and take to the mat, and I think she's got the better wrestling here. So unless Robertson can, sort of fall on top somehow, pull guard, get a sweep or a reversal, I think Rodriguez should come away the victor in this matchup, but she's the underdog here at plus 110. Robertson, the more experienced fighter, I think rightfully so, is the minus 130 favorite. But again, if this stays standing for the majority of the fight, I highly edge this to Rodriguez. And as far as just the speed, the power, the minute winning, I think Rodriguez wins those attributes as well. It's just that BJJ, it's just that ability to maybe take over if Rodriguez gets tired in this matchup. That scares me. So I'm not going to bet this fight for Rodriguez, but I do think she comes away with the upset victory. Probably a 3-round decision result for the underdog. Light heavyweight bout up next between Ed Herman and Zach Cummings, two guys we have not seen or heard of in a while. And there's some good reasons behind it. I mean, Zach Cummings, he had a horrific back injury since we last saw him 2.5 years ago in the UFC in 2020. He had like some herniated disc problems, maybe some degenerative disc problems as well he had operated on. And the guy was bedridden and crippled for a while, couldn't do household tasks. He actually has his own fight promotion now as a day job since he wasn't fighting, and didn't know if he would return to fighting at all. So just training again and doing normal activities day to day is a moral victory for him. But now this fight card is in Kansas City, his hometown crowd. He wants to have his friends and family there to see him off in the sunset and go off potentially in a win. So that's probably why he's going up a weight class here, because they probably think that Ed Herman is one of the few people he can beat at this point. And Ed Herman is 42 years old, slow, plodding. We haven't seen him since mid-2021, where he survived all 3 rounds against Alonzo Menefield, much to many people's surprise. Showed that he still has some durability and enough pop in his punches to gain the respect of Menefield in that fight and last all 3 rounds. So 42 years old, I think Ed Herman is the longest rostered fighter currently still fighting. I think since 2006. It's been rare to even see him miss a calendar year in the octagon. He's been fighting for the promotion this whole way through. So old, grizzled submission fighter in Ed Herman, who at this point the strategy would be to, be durable enough to make your opponent tired, get them to the mat somehow, and just wrap up a limb and get the submission victory. That would really be the path to victory for maybe either guy here. Zach Cummings has pretty good wrestling as well in his prime. A good BJJ black belt as well, but it should be Zach Cummings with the speed. It should be Zach Cummings even at 38 years old with the more comprehensive striking combinations and accurate technique, better defensively. But, that's a lot of assumptions, right? It's been 3 years since we've seen him fight damn near, and he had this horrific back injury. He's 38 now. We know it's his retirement fight, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know who to trust in this fight. I'm going to trust whoever's got plus money next to them just out of principle, because this should be a 50-50 fight. Ed Herman has shown that he can survive and pull something out of his ass submission-wise. We saw that a couple fights ago against Slow Mike Rodriguez. He took a lot of punishment to the body. The ref should have stopped it as a TKO stoppage, but he stopped it due to a low blow. Ed Herman recovers using his 5 minutes that he was allowed, and he comes back and gets, I think it was a Kimura on Slow Mike Rodriguez in round 3. So, there's a lot of victories in the past for Ed Herman that have asterisks next to them. He knocked out Kadis Ibragimov, who's, one of the worst people to ever walk in the cage. He knocked out Patrick, did he knock him out, or did he get a decision victory over Patrick Cummings? I can't remember, but that guy was as old as he was at the time. So, there's a lot of asterisks in the last few victories for Ed Herman here, but there's no way Zach Cummings should be a minus 225 favorite in this bout. Ed Herman, plus 190. that's the side I'm going with just out of principle. If he should win this fight more often than plus 190 should indicate, because we know nothing about what's going to happen in this fight. If it goes over, if it goes under, don't have a clue. So least confident pick on the entire card, not putting any betting action towards this fight. I will have some popcorn and laugh watching however this fight unfolds. So hopefully it's epic. Hopefully it's fun and comical. Give me Ed Herman as the underdog here. We have a fun flyweight bout up next between Mateusz Nicolau and Brandon Royval. Men's 125. Can't wait for this one because we've got the very technical striker and grappler in Mateusz Nicolau, the Brazilian, who's 19-2 with 6 knockouts, 5 submissions. He has 8-0 in decision results. He's taking on Brandon Royval, who's currently 4-2 in the UFC. He's the former LFA flyweight champion. Just an all-action fighter is Brandon Royval, who has 3 knockouts, 9 submissions, 12 finishes in all that make up his 14 wins and 6 losses. So he's very kill or be killed, and he's shown nothing but that quality in the UFC so far. Only losing by finish to Brandon Moreno by that TKO stoppage and by submission to Alexander Pantoja. So 2 high-level guys, and you've got Brandon Royval scoring victories over guys like Matt Schnell most recently, Tim Elliott, Kai Kara France, and he does have a couple of pieces of adversity in those fights. He was dropped early by Matt Schnell before locking up a guillotine, and he was, taken down and controlled a lot against Rogerio Bontorin a couple fights ago, but ultimately able to sway the judges. 2 of the judges scored it in his favor in that split decision result with his better striking technique, and he was able to score, I think, a reversal on Bontorin in round 3. So he's been in trouble in his last 4 fights. Now, Mateusz Nicolau is very technically sound. The guy has a good counter-striking style. Sometimes can be low output because of that, just waiting for his opponent to open up and doesn't usually be the aggressor. But with Brandon Royval, you're not going to have that problem. He's going to open up all of those opportunities for Mateusz Nicolau's counter-striking. The better striker and the better grappler, in my opinion. Nicolau should be able to take this fight to the ground or keep it standing wherever he wants to go with this one, and he's the better decision winner. And at flyweight, I think that's very important. So to not only have knockout power in his strikes, not only have minute-winning equity in this fight to win a decision, but also be technically sound on the ground and not probably not fall victim to any of Royval's guillotine tricks that he's shown in the past. That would be Royval's path to victory. Probably hit something wild on the feet at striking range and then get a club and sub victory, lock up that guillotine. That's how I would see Royval winning this fight. I find it very unlikely that he would win a decision here. Nicolau, I think, could win inside the distance or by decision, and I think he wins inside the distance. I think he catches Royval rushing forward with something, hits him clean with like a nice clean counter right cross, maybe locks up a submission of his own, or just finishes by strikes in the ground. So I'm going to call Nicolau to win inside the distance here, but I'm just taking his money line. Minus 190, I did put 2.5 units on him. I'm very confident in Nicolau to win this one. Featherweight bout up next between TJ Brown and Bill Algeo. This is a featherweight matchup where both guys on paper have a little bit of a similar skill set. Both guys like to strike and both guys like to grapple a little bit, but how it plays out in the cage, much different. More of a traditional boxing stance and style, brawling, more of a wrestle boxer style from TJ Brown, who is powerful. He can find his mark. He's going to be the slightly smaller man here and try to work his way on the inside, but his takedowns, I think, in his wrestling are a lot better than Bill Algeo's. Bill Algeo, though, he likes to get this fight to the mat from purely a submission and BJJ realm perspective, but his striking weapons are more at distance, hands low style, keeps a wide base, good in and out movement with the kicks and long range weapons. He is 6 foot tall at the weight class and a long reach. So both guys about the same age, 32 for TJ Brown, 33 for Bill Algeo, but both guys are very susceptible to getting taken down. So both 3-3 in the UFC and both BJJ black belts. So there are some similarities here, even though they are kind of different fighters when you watch them on tape. TJ Brown coming off of an upset victory, or at least maybe like an even money play. I got him at slight plus money last December against the newcomer Eric Silva, and people kind of clowned on me for that pick, because not many people were high on TJ Brown and not many people were expecting Eric Silva to drop the ball. He looked like a dangerous threat, but TJ Brown showed that he can really dish out some punishment up close, get a young fighter like Eric Silva to the mat and wear him out down the stretch and score that round 3 submission. So you would expect Bill Algeo to be able to probably have some good submission defense and probably better BJJ offense purely speaking about the submission threat. But TJ Brown, I could see him really pushing a pace with the striking up close, getting Bill Algeo trapped against the cage, working in for some early and often takedowns, and maybe winning this by decision down the stretch. But where it comes into the favor of Bill Algeo is the pacing. Algeo's got better cardio over all 3 rounds, in my opinion, more apt to work his way into a fight. Probably won't accept bottom position, and we've seen TJ Brown get reversed and taken down himself. So that's where I think this happens. I think TJ Brown maybe could have success in round 1, but then ultimately fall apart down the stretch. And I think Bill Algeo should win this fight, probably be able to use those long range, more like karate-based style of striking at range, maybe snipe TJ Brown, and hopefully fend off as many takedown threats as he can early on. But we've seen Bill Algeo taken down in every single fight so far. So luckily it took Andre Fili in his last fight in September all the way until round 3 to successfully complete a takedown. But when he did, what happened? He controlled Bill Algeo, had him in submission threat danger, and took his back and won that fight. So, man, for minus 205 on the money line of Bill Algeo against plus 175 TJ Brown, for 2 guys with the same record in the UFC, it looks a little wide to me. I will take Bill Algeo as a pick, but not going to touch this from a betting perspective. I think it does ultimately go all 3 rounds. I think the overs are good here, but give me Bill Algeo to win this down the stretch. Not a lot of value on the line, if I'm being honest, but give me Bill Algeo to win by decision. Lightweight fight up next between the returning legend Clay Guida at 41 years old, taking on the 28-year-old Mexican prospect Rafa Garcia. And these are 2 guys at lightweight that kind of fight similarly, right? They weaponize their pace with the grappling, the takedown offense, and win the fights that way. But they're eager to strike as well at close range. So Clay Guida, even at 41 years old in his 35th appearance in the UFC come Saturday, still a brawling striker with very good head movement, light on his feet, always bouncing up and down, trying to be a hard-to-hit target with that lateral movement. Coming off of a split decision win that went his way in December against retiring fighter Scott Holtzman, Clay Guida went strike for strike with him, landed some pretty good shots early, and then employed the takedown threat in rounds 2 and 3, which, the wrestling and the takedown offense looks a little bit more labored at this age for Clay Guida. His striking is very basic as far as the combos go. Defense not always as strong, and as far as the wrestling goes, he's really not doing much with the positions, which is largely why that fight was a split decision result that he ultimately still won. But that's something to note here, because Rafa Garcia at 28 years old, takedowns come easy. He holds position, advances position, and softens up his target with, a lot of ground strikes, elbows, and looks for the submission. So he's doing something with the position, is Rafa Garcia. Who else knows that better than Hayaser Mahashate, Rafa Garcia's last opponent a few months ago, who was a much bigger opponent, a very strong and formidable power striker, but Garcia able to show some good defense, close the distance, land on the chin of Mahashate, and take him to the mat, I think like half a dozen times in that fight. So the cardio is something that has been a cause for concern for Rafa Garcia. We saw that in a few of his early fights against like Nasrat Haqparast and Chris Grutzmacher, but it seems like he shored that up. He does pretty well mixing up the wrestling and the striking. Rafa Garcia does. Clay Guida is a guy who looks a little bit labored getting those takedowns these days, and but he's still good at sticking the jab, feinting, moving around, being somewhat of a hard-to-hit target. And if you get Clay Guida hurt and you try to swarm on him, he still is durable enough to withstand a lot of that, and you can really wear yourself out trying to finish this guy. So hopefully Rafa Garcia doesn't fall victim to that, because that's gotten him in trouble in the past. And Leonardo Santos, one of Clay Guida's most recent opponents, that's basically what lost him the fight. He almost finished Clay Guida in round 1. Couldn't quite get the job done. Guida saved by the ref and the buzzer, and Guida able to go in there and put a pace on Santos and tap him out, the BJJ specialist, in round 2. So, not only is Clay Guida alternating wins and losses in his last 4 fights, but it's also alternating, older and younger opponents. So whenever he gets the young guys like the Claudio Puelles, that guy was able to knee bar him in round 1. Mark Madsen was, at least in fight years and also technically younger than him, able to have a striking battle with him, oddly enough, for the 2 wrestlers, and able to put a pace on him and win that fight. So even if this does nullify itself, these two grapplers, Rafa Garcia and Clay Guida, if they have a striking battle, Rafa, I think, wins that all day long. But if he mixes in the takedowns, does the better damage on top, I think Rafa Garcia should cruise to a decision victory here. Clay Guida, very durable. He is susceptible to getting submitted. I'm not sure if Rafa Garcia can get that done here, but at 41 years old, this might be the time to, make a statement and have Garcia get maybe a club and sub victory over Clay Guida. That's possible. The money line is wide here, though. Minus 245 for Garcia, plus 210 for Clay Guida. It makes sense to me, but, Clay Guida is one of those guys that stays active, stays in shape, and it seems like the money line is just about right. Not a lot of extra meat on the bone for Rafa Garcia, so I'm staying off this from a betting perspective, but I think that we probably do hit the overs in this fight, and we do see Garcia get his hand raised. Up next at bantamweight, we've got a young versus old matchup here as well, with Pedro Munhoz representing the older, more veteran fighter here, 36 years old at bantamweight, taking on Chris Gutierrez, the 31-year-old up-and-coming fighter with all the momentum on his side, coming off of a retiring of a legend victory over Frankie Edgar. At the end of last year, he had that jumping knee victory in round one, walk-off KO over Frankie Edgar, knocked him out stiff, and, handled that veteran test appropriately. So he's looking to add another big name under his belt in Pedro Munhoz, who at 36 and 18 appearances in the bantamweight division is one of the most experienced bantamweights in the UFC. So going 9 wins, 7 losses, and 2 no contests for Pedro Munhoz. A negative decision result, going 6 wins and 7 losses in his decision results. The guy has got a submission game in his back pocket, usually used as a counter for a wrestling threat. He's got a super tight guillotine, but for Pedro Munhoz, never really offensively wrestling. So neither man here probably looking to take the fight to the mat. I would expect this to be striker versus striker. Maybe a battle of leg kicks, since both guys are very proficient in those. Pedro Munhoz, he's had success. He does have some power in his strikes, but we haven't seen that in some time. In fact, since his last fight was the no contest due to an eye poke over Sean O'Malley, it's been a while since we've seen this guy get his hand raised. I think early 2021 was the last time we saw him get a win, and that was over Jimmy Rivera. In between that were four losses. We had the loss to Jose Aldo, the loss to Dominic Cruz, the loss to Frankie Edgar by a split decision in 2020, and the loss to Aljamain Sterling before that. So it's been a while since we've seen a good run from Pedro Munhoz, losing 4 of his last 5, not counting that no contest to Sean O'Malley. But all good names, forgivable losses, but the momentum is not on his side, and things probably won't be getting much better since they're giving him a very dangerous prospect here in Chris Gutierrez, who's 19-4, riding, I think, like an 8-fight unbeaten streak in the UFC. He's 7-1-1 draw in the UFC, only getting that loss to Raoni Barcelos in his debut, the only time he's ever been finished, which was by submission. Neither of these two men have been knocked out, and Pedro Munhoz never been finished at all. So I could see this certainly going over, but if somebody were to end the fight, I would say it's Chris Gutierrez. He does have the power advantage, the speed advantage, height, reach, youth, every striking metric available, output, just the amount of weapons and target selection. He switches stances very well, cuts angles extremely well. The guy can strike moving forward, moving backwards, counter-striking. I mean, he just times things very, very well. And this is across his career pre-UFC and in the promotion now. So, I have a lot of faith in Chris Gutierrez. I did parlay him up with Gilbert Burns, who was on last week's card. Gilbert Burns, an easy night in the office. So now we've got just the second leg to cash with Chris Gutierrez. I've got 2 units on him to close out this parlay, minus 123 combined parlay odds. And I'm pretty sure in that parlay I have Chris Gutierrez at the same odds he currently still is. The line has not moved. Minus 205 or so for Gutierrez. Plus 175, the underdog price on Pedro Munhoz. I like Gutierrez all day in this spot. Very confident in this guy to get the job done. With neither man being, knocked out before, I would expect this to go to the scorecards. But Gutierrez, probably the more likely man to get a finish if somebody does get a finish in this spot. But give me Gutierrez, dominant decision victory, adding another veteran to his resume. Light heavyweight bout up next between Tanner Boser and Ian Cutelaba. Kind of a goofy matchup here. We do have Tanner Boser returning to light heavyweight after having a handful of fights at heavyweight. And his last one in September, he was only 229 pounds against Rodrigo Nascimento, who was 261. The grappler there, Tanner Boser, the karate-based fighter, and Ian Cutelaba, a grappler himself. Greco-Roman base, sambo background, judo background. The guy is a very strong grappler from Moldova, but he's a reckless striker as well. Just a total wild man, never really in check with his fight IQ, his emotions, or his game plan. He makes very bad decisions in the middle of the fight. And that's part of why he's on a 3-fight losing streak right now. So Cutelaba last fought Kennedy and Nzechukwu in November. Had early striking success, cracked the chin of Nzechukwu early, like within the first minute of the first round, and then let him off the hook and started grappling with him, trying to take the big man to the ground. So he ate some flush knees to the face and got finished off by ground strikes in round 2. And Ian Cutelaba has been finished in his last 3 fights straight. Johnny Walker before that took his back and submitted him in round 1, and he had early success against Ryan Spann the fight before that, and then Spann able to use his bigger frame and wrap up a guillotine, which is one of his signature moves, tap out Cutelaba in round 1. So he's kind of fighting for his spot on the roster, Cutelaba here, but this is a winnable fight for him. Tanner Boser has fallen victim to the grappling threats before, guys like Ilir Latifi who can take him down. And then most recently his fight against, like I said, Rodrigo Nascimento, the grappler who had never been to a decision in his whole career, took Boser to a decision and got the win. Boser was able to do the better striking, work, even had Rodrigo Nascimento in some trouble, but couldn't put him away without getting taken down easily and often, and basically just beat on for 3 rounds. So that could happen here. I would expect Cutelaba to maybe for once play somewhat of a smart fight and make it boring, just control Tanner Boser, sort of the way that Cutelaba was controlling Dustin Jacoby a few fights back, and just trying to out-grapple him there to no end. So that would frustrate Boser. I think Boser, the karate-based fighter here, he does have some power in his hands. He is proven to be pretty durable, even lasting 3 rounds with Cyril Gane back in the day somehow. His only knockout loss was on the regional scene against past his time UFC fighter Tim Hagg. I think knocked him out in like 6 seconds or something. So that's the only time his chin has been cracked. Since then, he's been good. 31 years old for Boser. Not impressed with either of these two guys. Cutelaba, surprisingly only 29 years old, even though he's been in the UFC like 14 appearances, going 5-8 and 1 draw. But I think Cutelaba could take him down and control him and win the majority of this fight, get his hand raised by decision, which is not normally how either man really wins or loses here. So we'd be going against the odds for that one. It's supposed to end inside the distance, and plus 450 is the prop I'm seeing for Cutelaba by decision. I might throw a fraction of a unit on that because I think that's how this plays out. I've got a hunch. So I'd rather play just a fraction of a unit on something high payout like that, prop-wise, than to trust either of these guys with my money. So the pick is Ian Cutelaba. He's a slight favorite here, but no bet unless it's one of those high payout props. So give me Cutelaba, boring decision. Another light heavyweight bout up next between Dustin Jacoby and Azamat Murzakanov. A very fun matchup between two powerful strikers. Murzakanov, more of a one-at-a-time, one-punch knockout type of striker. Dustin Jacoby, more of the point fighting, but still very powerful and dangerous. Tall, rangy kickboxer with high-level elite experience, former Glory kickboxer, and a guy who could very well be on a 10-fight unbeaten streak right now upon returning to the UFC for his second stint, but that was not to be. He did lose his last fight against Khalil Roundtree last fall, a very close split decision, a controversial one. I personally think Dustin Jacoby won enough minutes in that fight to win. He did outscore Khalil Roundtree 120 strikes to 85 significantly. I know that's not how we score fights, but the judges saw the bigger moments, especially in the end of the fight in round 3, going to Khalil Roundtree. And you can see that on the face of Jacoby, swollen eye, lacerations, things like that. So some big knees did some good work at the end of the fight. You could give round 3 to Khalil Roundtree, but I would give the first 2 to Jacoby. But nonetheless, he's coming off of a loss here, but he's a minus 170 favorite in this bout, plus 145, the underdog price on Murzakanov. And I gotta say, I'm surprised this is not a bigger favorite spot for Jacoby, who has more of the decision-winning equity here. He's a much higher-level kickboxer, the bigger man, more UFC experience, more high-level experience even outside of the UFC. Murzakanov is a 12-0 prospect, though. I mean, 9 knockouts and 1 submission make up those 12 wins, but largely, low-level opponents. He had 8 round 1 knockouts, but now he's coming off of back-to-back round 3 stoppages in the UFC. One of them in his debut last March to Nchukwi. Murzakanov was very low output, slow plotting, trying to find the perfect punch or the perfect strike. Eventually, he found it in round 3, bringing victory from the jaws of defeat there. Very nice jumping knee against Nchukwi, who we've seen is not the best fighter, but he came back against Devin Clark last year and managed to score another round 3 knockout. And his success came in round 2, almost finishing the job against Devin Clark, and then finally finished him early round 3. And Murzakanov, he can be one at a time, but once he does find that southpaw weapon, if he gets the overhand left or the straight left, he's very accurate with the subsequent punches, usually a right hook, and then punches you like 5 times before you hit the ground and unconscious. So the guy does have some finishing power and some aggressive swarming ability, but Jacoby is a guy who's never been finished more than 1 time, and that was to King Mo Lawal back in Bellator years ago. The guy has fought a lot of people. He's even finished guys like Da Un Jung by, one-hit knockout himself. And I just love the fact that he's able to put a high output striking clinic on as a 6'4", 205-pounder and not gas out. Murzakanov could not put up that output without gassing out, and I think Jacoby could really, just pepper him with strikes and maybe finish this inside the distance just through sheer accumulation of damage. What I love about Jacoby is his ability to strike out of both stances and seamlessly switch mid-combination. You think you're fighting an orthodox, and then middle of the combination, you're fighting a southpaw. And speaking of that, Jacoby just fought southpaw Khalil Roundtree. A couple fights ago, he fought and beat southpaw Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. So he's used to fighting southpaws, and he can, switch up his stance to fluster the game and make Murzakanov more hesitant than he already is as a striker. So give me Jacoby here very confidently. I just think he's more apt to either win inside the distance, win by decision, and minus 170 I think is a steal. So I put 2.5 units on him at that price tag, and I think he does find his win inside the distance. We have an amazing co-main event this Saturday. Featherweight fight between Edson Barboza and Billy Quarantillo, 2 of my favorites for different reasons and different styles. Edson Barboza, I've been a fan of his for a long time. I was actually in the crowd for his debut. He was just 25 at the time. He's 37 now, and that night he defeated a man by leg kicks on short notice. So that became a staple of the man's career. Edson Barboza, deadly Muay Thai, very good technique, never out of position, and he hammers people's legs, hammers the body. His boxing is really slick, and he carries a high pace, but where he struggles is the grappling. Once you take him down, he can get back to his feet, and it really does take some high-level wrestlers to get him completely out of the game and neutralized, but it's something that he's not really going to get much better at this point in his career. At 37, I think his defense has been a little bit lackluster. His cardio does not seem on point anymore, and you'll probably start to see things regress at this weight class at 37. Now, Billy Quarantillo, 34 years old, and he's extremely hittable, but he can really use that as like a weaponized, not only weaponized cardio, but weaponized toughness as well. He'll wait for his opponents to, finish teeing off on him, use his durability to march forward, break their spirits, their confidence, and, just take them down in the next stretch of the fight. And we saw that against Billy Quarantillo and Alexander Hernandez in December, right? Hernandez had some early success, damaged Quarantillo, cut him open, and then, of course, Hernandez is known to gas out. Quarantillo managed to put him away in the second part of the fight. So that could happen here. It's certainly a scenario that could play out. And we've got Quarantillo, the minus 180 favorite, Barboza, the plus 155 underdog here. But I'm just wondering about looking at just common matchups here. We're looking at one of their common opponents was Shane Burgos. Edson Barboza dismantled Shane Burgos, was able to find his range early in round 1. It took him a couple of minutes, but he started working the jab, working the counters, hit him with a spinning wheel kick, and, from there, just he could not miss, and eventually knocked out Burgos in that very, scary-looking, almost like a fight career-ending sequence there where he had that delayed knockout on Shane Burgos. I think that was early 2021 at this point. So he dismantled Shane Burgos, whereas Shane Burgos later that year had an absolute war with Billy Q and beat Billy Q over 3 rounds, and both of those guys absorbed a ton of strikes. So comparing that common opponent and just looking at the dynamic of this fight, seeing how many significant strikes Billy Q absorbs on average, almost 6 per minute. So I'm not sure that kind of zombieing forward strategy is going to work against Edson Barboza, who's such a sniper when he finds his range. And even at 37 years old, I think he could still, handle Billy Q the way that he handled Shane Burgos. So, one thing that Billy Q does have, of course, is the kryptonite of Barboza, which is that grappling. He does have some wrestling potential, but never really is able to get that part of his game going accurately or reliably until his opponents slow down later in the fight. So, if Barboza gets going dangerous and early, I'm not sure Billy Q is going to be around to last into the an ability to take over the fight and swarm Barboza, unless he does it early. If Quarantillo can crowd Barboza early, never let him get that confident part of his game going, make him hesitant, and just don't give him room to breathe, then sure. But Barboza does have some good Muay Thai clinch techniques as well, and he moves very quickly and can skirt around the cage and find space to strike again at range. So I got to go with Edson Barboza here. I just, looking at those numbers, again, 5.72 significant strikes absorbed from Billy Q on average, over his, not that many fights in the UFC so far. It's only high-level guys that have really controlled Barboza and completely neutralized his game. Most recently, that was Bryce Mitchell, who did a good job of that. Amir Khani was able to do it for a period of time. Khabib Nurmagomedov, we're looking at guys like Kevin Lee. So it's like these are high-level guys that he's fought that have been able to neutralize him. So I'm not sure if Billy Q is going to be able to, at least for the first round and a half, take down Barboza with much success keeping him there. So I got to take Barboza to do the better work. And both guys in round 3 would be a good play here. I'll probably just play that, a fraction of a unit for the fight to end in round 3, or either guy to get the knockout in round 3. Edson Barboza, inside the distance, scorecards equal no action is plus 200. I like that. Even Barboza just to win inside the distance, which is hugely likely here for as hittable as Billy Q is, that's like plus 350 or plus 375. So I'm going to take a stab on some props for Barboza. Give me another underdog yet again in the co-main event. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of the Fight Night card. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into this potential 5-round bout at featherweight between former featherweight champion Max Holloway and rising contender Arnold Allen. We've got the 31-year-old Max Holloway taking on the 29-year-old Arnold Allen. 2 years separate these guys in age, but man, Max Holloway in fight years, this guy is probably more towards his late 30s if you really want to consider all of the damage that he is not only dished out. I mean, it's a record-setting amount of strikes that he's dished out. He's landed more significant in total strikes than anybody in UFC history by a long shot. I think he's got, one of the most, I think maybe ranked number 4 as far as total cage time, with 6 hours and 50 minutes of cage time in the UFC since 2012. But that means he probably has to have absorbed, probably more significant strikes than anybody in history either. So he's been in some wars. He's probably more towards like the late 30s in fight years and fight miles here. So 2 years of age, in the favor of Allen, but it feels like a lot more than that. So you've got the bigger man at 5'11" for the Hawaiian Max Holloway. Former featherweight champion, provided those life-changing beatings over Brian Ortega, Jose Aldo twice, and of course Calvin Kattar. And, but he's been on the wrong side of 3 fights against Alexander Volkanovski. Those are his 3 last losses, and it's his last fight. His last fight was back in July of last year. The most decisive loss to Volkanovski yet, a 50-45 across the board where, Holloway just could not stop eating big punches from Volkanovski. And you could look and say, has Max Holloway fallen off a bit? Or did Volkanovski just kind of rise to the occasion? He's just like at this unbeatable level now. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I only say that because Max Holloway, how do you get any better than the beatdowns he put over Calvin Kattar, Brian Ortega, Jose Aldo twice? How do you get better than that? His only other loss recently being up a weight class to Dustin Poirier for the championship. So I think it's just only down. I think you reached your peak when you're hitting those types of output numbers, going God mode against Calvin Kattar in early 2021. It could only get a little bit worse and less impressive from there. He did, in the meantime, have that awesome performance against Yair Rodriguez. But again, he had to start wrestling to get some of those rounds. He was getting hit cleanly by strikes and still showing that durability. He's never been knocked out. So there's a lot going for him, but there's a lot of narrative as far as predicting when is his decline really going to be. The age says 31. I think it's a lot more than that, and I think his decline is going to come a little bit more than most featherweights would. Arnold Allen, 29 years old. He's the opposite tail. I mean, he's been very inactive. I think over the past 10 UFC fights, it's been since like 2015 since he made his debut. So not very active at all. He's a 19-1 fighter. He has his one loss pre-UFC, but in the UFC he's unbeaten, and he is a very good striker, good counter striker, more of the powerful striker out of these two, but less output, right? He does have some grappling offense, but largely he's been striking these days. His last fight was last year against Calvin Kattar. Unfortunately, that fight was cut short due to the knee injury of Calvin Kattar, so we didn't really learn much from that. Before that, in last March at UFC London, he faced, the very depleted featherweight version of Dan Hooker and was able to just put a barrage of strikes on him in round one and get him out of there. So it only took about half of a round to do so. Showed some pretty good finishing instinct. And before that, it was a fight against Sadiq Yusuff where, again, he knocked down Sadiq Yusuff with a big straight left out of the southpaw stance where he strikes, and I think a left high kick dropped Sadiq Yusuff on two separate occasions. But then he was able to get cage stalled in round three and probably lost that round and just slowed down dramatically. So, to break Max Holloway, you're going to have to either, be one of the first people to crack his durability or put up with his pace over 5 rounds. And I just don't see Arnold Allen doing either of those things. But again, this guy is still improving. We could see some more wrinkles to his game. Could he come out here and grapple a bit more? Potentially, but I still think Holloway is good enough of a mover to not get stalled in the cage or taken down that easily. So you're going to have to rely on Arnold Allen to have the bigger moments consistently, stay defensively sound over Max Holloway. When you're looking at the money line right now of minus 180 to minus 195 for Max Holloway, plus 155, plus 165 for the underdog Arnold Allen, something about that seems like just about correct for me. So I'm not seeing a lot of extra value on Max Holloway, although he could come in here and have another godlike performance. I have to do, I have to play this a little bit safer, just from a hunch feeling that Arnold Allen could be a little bit more of a high ceiling in this fight than we've seen in the past, and Max Holloway could be on a decline here. I'm really thinking about it that way and just thinking, when are we going to see this durability cracked from Holloway? He's hit clean a lot. We saw the Yair Rodriguez fight, getting his chin knocked back, and he springs right back into form. But Arnold Allen hits hard. This guy has still, since we haven't seen a whole lot of him, there's a lot that I have to learn. So before I put my money against a guy who's been unbeaten in the UFC, I just want to watch this fight and see how Max comes back after yet another loss, and this time a very decisive one. Where's the motivation at? Is he okay with being more of a gatekeeper, and things like that? Where's he at 31 years old, technically in the UFC? And we'll see. So I do expect Holloway to have the better output and win this fight by decision. I like the overs in this fight, but from a betting perspective, probably going to lay off of this one. But give me Max Holloway to get a decision victory. So there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for UFC Fight Night Kansas City this Saturday. Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen at featherweight. Super fun card, hoping to keep as many of these fights as we possibly can. Got a lot of money line action I pointed out, and looking to add a few key props, some of which I spoke about in the video. Join me again at Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time for my live stream this week with the great Cody, a.k.a. Blood Money MMA Bets, one of my good friends in the community and somebody I love breaking down fights with. He's a super smart gambler, very profitable and knowledgeable. So join me then on Wednesday. I'll talk to you guys then. Cheers.